We're an island nation, drawn to the sea that surrounds us. For many, it's a playground. For others, it's where we earn our living. But the sea's unpredictable. It can change in an instant. And when accidents happen, they happen very fast.
The sea is a dangerous place. If you don't respect the sea will bite you.
There to save our lives is a volunteer army of nearly 5,000 ordinary people, ready to leave their jobs, their families, to race to our rescue.
It makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, to know that if it wasn't for you, that person wouldn't be here.
They rescued me, but they also saved a mum, a daughter, a sister, a wife.
Oh my God.
To see someone disappear under the water right in front of you is brutal. It's absolutely horrendous.
Equipped with their own cameras,
My light flashing. Yeah, mine.
the crews give us a unique insight into every call-out as only they see it.
Right, there's another little wave.
Speeding through the roughest weather, searching for people who may only have moments to live.
Can you still hear me?
For those who risk their lives, it has become a way of life.
When those pagers go off, it's life and death.
On the south coast of Ireland, Kinsale has been a fishing port for hundreds of years. The boats that trawl far out into the Atlantic often run the gauntlet of storms whipped up across thousands of miles of open ocean. An urgent mayday has come in for the volunteers of the Kinsale lifeboat crew. As a Force 8 gale has sent ships scurrying for safety, one fishing boat has failed to reach harbour. Winds gusting over 50 miles an hour have forced her onto some of the treacherous rocks that litter this coast.
The land juts out in little peninsulas in a lot of places, so where it juts out, you'll have shelves of rock under the water.
The people that live in Kinsale, we know where the dangers are. We know where the shallow rocks are. But with high tide, you just can't see those rocks, and people are unprepared.
The Kinsale crew don't know exactly where the boat has grounded or how many are on board.
The only information I had was that there was a boat was running ashore. I was kind of assuming it was something small, like a small fishing boat.
The minute we rounded a blockhouse, we could see the mast of the fishing vessel, so we knew where she was.
Seeing a large fishing boat, you get that moment of surprise and shock, going, oh my God, you know, that's a big boat.
As she was trying to reach harbour, the 68-ton trawler's nets caught in her propeller. Powerless, she's been impaled on the rocks, and there's no sign of anyone on deck.
The boat was being hammered by big waves. The side closest to the waves was rolling down under the water.
We were afraid that she was going to capsize, you know. That's all we were thinking.
As every wave pushes the boat higher onto the rocks, she's listing further over with every roll. The crew need to find out who's on board and get them off before the boat overturns.
We could see the door of the wheelhouse opening and a figure coming out. I still didn't know how many were on board, and that's one of the first things we were trying to assess. But I didn't get a response.
Still unsure how many fishermen are in danger, the crew need to work out how to get them off the boat fast. But in these conditions, there are no easy options.
We couldn't bring our lifeboat right beside them because of the movement of the fishing boat. So we determined at that stage that they needed to get to us. Yelling
above the wind, the crew tell the fishermen to swim for the lifeboat. But in these seas, even the strongest swimmer risks being swept away.
We decided to veer down, which was dropping our anchor from the front of our boat and then reversing under control of the anchor line.
Helmsman Nick needs to get in as close as possible to grab the men as they're swept past. He's relying on his anchor to maneuver the lifeboat safely between the fishing boat and the rocks.
I was asking the lads repeatedly, is she holding, while I was watching the rocks, because everything had to be spot on. There was no room for error.
You're reversing the boat onto a rocky shore. If you don't do it right, you're going to end up in a very dangerous situation.
As the crew battle to get in position, behind them, a body hits the water.
He was eager to get off the fishing vessel. He didn't hang around. He was gone.
Here, come back here to me.
I know it was his leg or his arm, but I just horsed him in and just got back to the throttles.
Put your feet in there.
One fisherman is safe, but it's still not clear how many more are left on board.
They were cold and they were in shock, but there was no injuries. They were just relieved to be on board.
As the doomed fishing boat rolls further with every wave, one more fisherman appears on deck. But Nick's losing his battle to hold the lifeboat in position.
Is the anchor holding?
Now, just a metre from the rocks behind them, he's almost out of room to manoeuvre.
I was running out of space. For the first two, I could watch the anchor and watch the casualties and move in for them. But for the last man, he left it too late.
The third guy seemed to be holding on. I remember thinking that he couldn't swim, or, you know, he, for some reason, wasn't, you know, going to make it. Please just go for it and get to us as well.
Still attached to the seabed by the anchor, Nick makes a split-second call to cut loose, so he can move in before the fisherman is swept away.
Is that everybody?
Everybody. Okay. People. Right, let's go. Let's go.
Okay. Okay.
I had to make the decision to cut the line, just to move in to grab him before he got out of my reach.
Put that leg.
If we didn't cut the anchor line and grab him, I would probably say it would be loss of life. You know, if the weather was doing that to the fishing boat, I'm not too sure what it would do to a human body.
The three fishermen are all from Portugal. As they start the short journey to harbour, their boat is left to the mercy of the sea. Blown just a few hundred metres further down the coast, she would have reached the harbour safely.
We weren't speaking, obviously, the same language, but they had enough English to tell us they were okay. They were, you know, grateful.
Guarding over 12,000 miles of the UK and Ireland's coastline, Each of the 238 lifeboat stations battle their own unique conditions, but they all face one common enemy.
You can never tell what the sea is going to actually throw at you. The sea is merciless, and you just have to realise that and keep that in your mind at all times.
I can't say that I know the sea very well. I understand the sea. Know it very well, I wouldn't say, because nobody knows what it's going to do. Never, ever think that you know the sea.
I love the sea. I do, but I know to respect it. You can see how powerful and how spontaneous, if you like, the sea can be.
I see the sea as a living, breathing creature. You are there at its good grace. It's important not to become complacent. Even on a flat, calm summer's day, anything can go wrong.
It's like your best friend, but you also have to be very aware because that best friend could soon grow horns and turn nasty.
You can be prepared for any eventuality and something else will crop up. It's split-second things and there is no safety net.
Just 50 miles from the centre of London, sitting at the mouth of the Thames estuary, Sheerness has a proud seafaring history. It was the site of a Royal Navy dockyard for nearly 400 years, and there's been a lifeboat station here since 1970.
Where was that yacht that was anchor? That was further down here, wasn't it? Slaughterhouse. It's all around the point here, isn't it?
27 volunteers guard one of the most peculiar patches around. When a call comes in, they can find themselves in some of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Or they can be called upriver into a myriad of waterways and some of the quietest backwaters in the country.
You've got the river, where you've got all the different creeks, you've got mud banks, you've got different sites of tide, so it makes it an interesting station to be on, I think.
And you don't have to love mud to work here, but it helps. As the tide drops, it exposes acres of oozing mudflats, crisscrossed with uncharted banks, creeks and channels. Navigating this eerie mire can leave even the most experienced mudlark scratching his head.
A lot of these charts, when you go into the creeks, because generally it costs a lot of money to survey the area. The river gets surveyed because there's commercial big ships in this sort of area, but in the creeks, these areas aren't surveyed. They haven't been surveyed for a long time. There's a lot of buoys that are lit, but once you get into the creeks, there's no buoys that are lit, so it would be like driving down a country lane with no lights.
Just before midnight, the Sheerness crew get an urgent page. Tonight, the Coast Guard has called them upriver. Someone is in the water somewhere in the Medway estuary.
The information was given was someone in a house could hear some shouting. Wasn't sure where it was coming from, so obviously they phoned 999.
The crew launched their inshore lifeboat. Highly manoeuvrable, it's designed to float in just a few inches of water, but on an ebb tide, with the water in retreat, even the inshore lifeboat can't float on mud.
It was going at the best speed we could, because it does dry out when the tide's out.
We knew we had to be quick to get in there, deal with the casualty and get out again. Otherwise we get stranded.
With the sea temperature under 12 degrees, for anyone in the water, hypothermia can set in within 15 minutes. As the body starts shutting down, exhaustion and unconsciousness follow. In the pitch dark, all the crew can do is head in the general direction of where the shouts were last heard. 5 minutes after launch, the Coast Guard radio with an update. The shouts for help have stopped.
We still wasn't that close yet, and you're thinking, we need to get there quick, and I still need to get there safely.
To make matters worse, the tide's going out. Anyone in the water could be swept past them in the dark and out to sea. And the more the tide retreats, the harder it is to navigate the emerging mudflats. Now with no more screams to guide them, the odds against finding anyone are rising fast.
We put up some paraflares which illuminate the area, so it's a flare that glows white and lights the whole area up to see if we could see him in the water.
Finally, half an hour after the call came in, they spot the casualty. It's a man in his 60s. He appears unconscious, caught in the anchor line of a moored yacht. A passing boatman has grabbed hold of him and is trying to pull him to safety.
Started trying to drag the casualty down the side of a boat and trying to drag him into his boat.
The engine was still engaged, so he was still going forward whilst holding on to the casualty's life jacket.
Do we let the coaches though?
The casualty is just inches from the propeller. The crew must act fast.
You right, Chris?
Checking mobile, this is Shinnet ILB. Information is body in the water. We are just recovering him now.
Sheppy mobile, over, Coast Guard, over. Dover Coast Guard, Sheppy, we're now on scene at Lower House Stadium, Lifeboat.
He wasn't responding to Chris. I could hear him shouting to the casualty and trying to get a response out of me. He wasn't responding at all.
Shinnet ILB, Coast Guard, over.
Coming, grab on that handle, that black out of red, Chris, coming. Ready? Yeah. Got it now? Okay, ready, on 3. 1, 2, 2.
The crew still have no idea how long the man was in the water before his shouts were heard. But it's clear he's in advanced stages of hypothermia.
He was extremely blue. I've never seen anyone that cold at all. He was still breathing, you could see he was breathing, but he wasn't responding to anything that we were shouting at him. I need to get this guy to some treatment to the ambulance now.
Paramedics are standing by at a slipway a few hundred metres away.
You alright, yeah? You still near? Yeah. You sit up here for me.
Suddenly, as the crew approach shore, there are signs of life. Experienced sailor Ken was transferring tools from his dinghy to his yacht when he lost his balance and slipped into the water.
A wave went past and it caught in the safety lines of the boat and I tipped into the water. I thought, what a bloody idiot. You stupid old git. I didn't instantly call for help because I didn't think anyone would hear me. I've always been self-reliant, or stubborn, I think is more the word. I fell in it under my own steam. I must get out under my own steam.
It was after Ken's first hour in the water that he accepted he couldn't save himself.
The tide was now running out, and I was in such a weakened state. I thought, well, if I don't get to shore or climb onto the mud of some kind, I know I'm not going to be here. And I managed to get along to the next boat along and grabbed hold of its mooring buoy, which is where I clung and started then to shout for assistance. I was resolved. If I was going to die, then hey-ho, this is it.
By the time he was rescued, Ken had been in the water for over 2 hours.
Someone shone a torch in my face, and at that point, I blanked out.
Right, we're getting you in the ambulance.
When we heard he was in the water for 2 hours, we were extremely shocked that he was still alive. How he survived as long as he did, I don't know.
He probably only had 15, maybe 30 minutes left. I don't know, but it was lucky I think we got there when we did.
I was extremely surprised that the situation escalated quickly, and it just illustrates just how something which you don't anticipate quickly goes wrong.
My daughter's going to go bloody bananas. I'm slugging on if you were my
Right, yeah. Between the RNLI and my life jacket, they saved my life. End of story.
The ever-changing seas around our coastline can catch out even the most experienced seafarer at any time of the year. But it's in the summer months, when hordes of oblivious sunseekers dive into our unpredictable seas, that the RNLI are at their busiest. And their ranks are swelled by an army of lifeguards. With bases at over 240 beaches, they save over 100 lives every summer season.
I love being a lifeguard. It's the best job in the world. Just never sort of wake up in the morning and think I don't want to go to work. It doesn't matter what the conditions.
How does the lifeguard differ from the lifeboatman?
They're a bit chubbier.
One of the most popular beaches in the southwest is here at Woolacombe in Devon.
Woolacombe's one of the busiest lifeguarded beaches in the country. Bit of a magnet for people coming down to surf. On a summer's day, it can reach sort of 10,000 people plus. Obviously, surf changes through the day, wind changes, things happen, things go wrong.
On a summer's day, a 2-metre swell has brought families and surfers to the beach, and the lifeguards already have a problem in the water. A bodyboarder is in trouble out beyond the break. The crew launch in under 2 minutes. Another lifeguard already in the water has reached her on a rescue board.
We can see Niall maybe 150, 200 metres out to sea. He's asking for assistance. Niall's very capable on a rescue board, so for him not to be able to bring a casualty in makes you start thinking that, okay, there's a reason why.
On the way out, we still didn't really have an idea what we were attending to. As soon as we got to the casualty, and then Niall was there on the board next to her, and he was telling us she had dislocated shoulder.
When I first saw her, I thought she was just kind of paddling around on a board, didn't really think she was in danger. But then as I got closer, I kind of noticed that she was a bit distressed. I asked her if she would be able to get onto the board, and she couldn't pull herself up. And then she slowly just went downhill.
She was in so much pain, she was starting to become unresponsive. Needed to get her back to shore as quick as possible. But they're in that area where every now and again a bigger set would come through.
Whipped up by the wind, the waves here can build up across thousands of miles of ocean. Notoriously difficult to predict, they hit the beach in sets of different sizes. If the crew are hit by a big roller, it could capsize their boat.
Guys, we need to turn the boat around quick.
The boat crew must make another circuit to get into a better position. While the casualty struggles in the water, just a few hundred meters away, her husband and 8-year-old daughter are oblivious to the battle to save her.
I was walking down across the beach, and I happened to walk past a lifeguard. The lad asked if my wife was out at sea. I answered yes, with that kind of tendency of why is the lifeguard asking me this? And he said, oh, I think your wife has hurt her shoulder. Got to the shore, and I'm looking over, and all I can see is the boat bobbing around behind the waves, but it's a very broken view because the waves are so huge that day. My biggest fear was that they were actually working on her on the boat, and that was maybe why they weren't bringing her in. Realistically, you think, how long does it take to pull someone into a boat and bring them back in again? So they must be doing something else, and that something else was the spiral that was feeding my fear. My mind was taking me to the worst place. It was taking too long.
Timing their approach with the incoming waves, the crew make another attempt to get the surfer Sam on board.
I'd gone out to seek really big waves and they were breaking, and every sort of third or fourth wave was a really big one. This wave just grabbed the board and ripped it from my arms, and I immediately knew that my shoulder was dislocated. You feel as though every nerve in your arm is on fire, it burns. I was so far out, but yet I could see life happening on the beach. That almost made it worse because I felt like saying, why can't you help me? You know, please, someone see me. I'm here. I thought I was going to die at that point. That was the point that I thought I was going to drown. Getting pulled into the boat was just the best feeling in the world. To know that I was going to see my daughter again was fantastic. And I just thought, I'm alive, and these guys are amazing.
Watch it, hold on.
By the time the boat came in, I was so anxious to see what was going on. Had to see. Kind of didn't want to look, but had to know, had to see. The first thing I saw was Sam, led on her side, spooning. I would describe spooning with the hunkiest lifeguard you have ever seen. The relief of, all right, she looks in terrible pain, but she looks very much alive, washed over me, and the only thing I could say was, really? Just at the sight of her spooning with this guy.
Can you get your hand to hold on to that zip? No, that one.
No, I can't even.
Because then it'll
Don't move the hand.
It'll keep it really steady when you try.
All the team can do now is help Sam with the pain while they await an ambulance.
Had this happened on land, it would have been a very simple call, or even me being driven to a hospital. But at sea, it turned into something far more dangerous. And it just makes you realise how strong those waves can be, even on a lovely July day. And yeah, I'm really, really lucky.
Can you get outside?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, Jesus Christ. You have no idea. I've had 3 kids.
Sam came back down the next day. Just thank all the lifeguards, really, and the effort they put in. Obviously, especially Niall for keeping her afloat in the water.
Am I squishing you?
No, that's okay.
Because I am quite big.
No, you're not. It's fine.
She came down to the beach a couple of days later to say thank you, yeah. And we said, go and get a shoulder operation.
The RNLI has been saving lives since it was founded in 1824. Just 2 years later, they built their first station in Ireland. Today, there are 46 stations guarding the entire coast, including here at Kinsale. This stretch of coast, a mixture of hard red sandstone with veins of softer rock, has been shaped over millennia by the pounding of the Atlantic. It's created a shoreline of breathtaking beauty, but also deadly risks. From huge natural harbours like Cork to steep cliffs littered with long, narrow caves and a seabed of sharp rocks, the unpredictable seas are ready to catch out any unwary seafarer. After 14 years' service, helmsman Nick Searles knows the dangers of this coastline all too well.
I would definitely think I have very good local knowledge, and I got to know maybe those places that other people would never go on boats. But I got that from people like older men in the community that would give you that advice. Definitely over the years, there's been a couple of shouts where we've had to get in close to rocks to get people off safely, so it does pay off.
One of those shouts was on a July day in 2013. When the call comes in, all the crew know is that a sailing ship has been blown onto rocks just a mile from Kinsale Harbour. But with the next Coast Guard update, the full scale of the job is revealed.
The Coast Guard said 30 persons on board. Most of them were on children.
Well, it was a bit of a game changer then.
A sailing ship, the Astrid, was on her way to take part in an international flotilla when she lost engine power and was washed onto shore. Strong waves are now pushing her even further up the rocks, and her hull is beginning to break up. On board are 6 crew and 24 trainees, some as young as 15. The Coast Guard has called in every lifeboat within 60 miles. The Kinsale crew arrived first.
When we got there, the boat was sinking. The children were on deck. They were very, very frightened. They thought this was it.
There was rocks underneath it, and the waves were crashing onto it. It was in imminent danger, basically. Nick, with a steely look in his eye, I remember he looked at us, and both of us, and he said, "Grand, we'll take them all."
Getting the lifeboat in close, Nick jumps aboard the stricken ship.
We decided I'd go on board and we get off as many as we could and ferry them out to other vessels that were close.
Nick starts to evacuate the youngest kids into the lifeboat. A few at a time, they're ferried to waiting boats who have also responded to the mayday.
We got the first 15 off, and then there wasn't an option anymore for the lifeboat to come in. The swell was rising and we were going further up the rocks, so the life rafts were launched.
As the Astrid succumbs to the sea, the lifeboats can no longer safely get alongside. Nick has to find a faster way to get the remaining kids and crew off. He launches the ship's life rafts. As the last casualties recovered, just one person is left on board the sinking ship.
Nick stayed on board while we were bringing the crew to safety. The boat started to move and go down. Nick was still on it.
I turned around and then wave came in. Boat went down. It's just when I came up, I was stuck.
As he prepares to abandon ship, Nick's life jacket catches in the wreckage. He's dragged down with it.
The boat was sinking, basically. The area he jumped on was underwater by the time we came back.
I was under the water. I had to undo the life jacket and then make my way up to the highest part of the ship, and the lads came along and took me off.
Nick made it safely to shore, along with all the Astrid's crew and trainees. But it could have been a very different outcome.
A couple of minutes later, it might have been a different story, I would think. You know, I'm not going to presume or guess, but it would have been a different story. Like.
Do you see yourself as brave?
No, but I don't know. I'm probably involved in close enough to 200 shouts now, and there's nothing the same. Everything is different. So, really, like when the pager goes off, we have to make the call that we need.
He didn't leave that boat until every one of them, every person was saved.
He stayed, got everyone off. We were lucky that, you know, he was there that day.
One of Britain's most famous seafaring sons hails from here on the coast of Yorkshire. Captain Cook discovered Australia in 1770 in his first command, HMS Endeavour. 32 years later, Whitby's first lifeboat station was established. Originally built to protect the local fishing fleet, one of their most infamous rescues was during World War I. A converted hospital ship, the SS Rohilla, was on her way to evacuate wounded from Dunkirk when she ran aground on a reef in a raging storm. Lifeboats from 5 stations were launched, including Whitby. The rescue took 3 days, while crowds gathered on the cliffs watching helplessly. In all, 144 lives were saved. Today, 34 volunteers guard this wild stretch of coast, where the Yorkshire moors tumble into the pounding waters of the North Sea, including local landlord and father of two, Ian.
I'll take for these now, I'll bring you coffee over for you.
Yeah,
all right. Not be a few minutes, wait for a car. Been working out for just over 3 years, and we run the local pub here, and joined up with the Lifeboat about 2.5 years ago. I was just listening to the lads one night in the pub there, the crew that was on there at the time, having a chat and a bit of banter, and I thought, well, my turn to, or could be a good opportunity to meet some more people here and get involved with the community a bit more. 13:10 altogether, please. Thank you very much.
Ian is ready 24/7 to answer the pager's call, and when it goes off, the locals can be left to wet their own whistles.
It makes life interesting. I mean, there's been times when he'll have been serving or just standing here chatting, and then suddenly he's gone. It doesn't even say got to go. The pager goes out, gone, off.
So have you had to leave the pub kind of mid-serving people before?
I've left it with customers in charge, yeah. Yeah. Chap asked me one day, he said, what happens if that goes off then before the other staff get here? I said, well, you'll be serving. And he was when I got back.
And when the call comes in, Ian and the rest of the crew head out into some of the most merciless seas around the UK.
The sea here is very different than most places. We have a funny sort of harbour going in and out with a big lip on it. So we can go from flat calm in the harbour to 10-foot rising waves within minutes.
The last day of the summer holidays. Late afternoon, an urgent call comes in.
I was at work. I was serving somebody. Pager went off. I legged it down here to the station.
The crew have been called 5 miles down the coast to Robin Hood's Bay, and every parent's worst nightmare. A girl paddling on the water's edge has been caught by a rip current and dragged out to sea. Her father went to save her, but has also been caught. Rip currents form under the surface of the sea, difficult to spot. They're one of the biggest dangers around our shores. They can pull the strongest swimmer far out to sea in seconds.
When you've got fairly big waves going into a beach, you could potentially only be up to your knees, but if a wave comes up past you, that water's got to go back out, and it's very powerful. And the more you get into it and the more you try and fight it, the more that the waves will just come in and keep pushing you out and keep pushing you out.
The 10-year-old girl and her father were last seen in the water together over 10 minutes ago.
It's always serious when there's people in the water, because if we don't get there in time, it goes bad. When I put sort of 2 and 2 together and realised, well, that's the same age as my daughter. Could have been me and my daughter. You're preparing for the worst, but you're hoping the worst is not going to be there when you get there.
They could be overwhelmed by the swell, waves over the head relentlessly. But then also, in a water temperature of about 14 degrees in the summer, hypothermia is going to start to set in, and it's going to start to cut off the blood supply to the extremities, to the limbs, and you can't use them to tread water. You're going to drown.
With no idea how far the rip current has pulled them out, both Whitby's inshore and all-weather lifeboats are launched. The first reaches Robin Hood's Bay in 10 minutes and begins to search. But the swell and strong winds have whipped the surface of the sea into a maelstrom.
If it was a nice, calm day, we would have been able to pick them out straight away. But because of the conditions, you couldn't see anyone.
The spray off the waves alone was making visibility for all of us really, really bad. You know, it just looked like a torrent of rain across the sea. It wasn't just a case of looking for 2 little dots. We couldn't see our own boat at times.
It's now been nearly an hour since the father and daughter were swept off the beach.
Very anxious, an anxious feeling. Knowing that any hold-up could mean the difference between them being here or not.
The Coast Guard have rescue teams on shore scanning the sea and have scrambled a search and rescue helicopter. Suddenly, from the skies, something spotted in the water.
All of a sudden, the downdraft of the helicopter just flattened the waves. could see two heads bobbing up and down together. My radio operator, Jamie, just shouted on the radio, "We've got him, we've got him."
The relief that came over me was unbelievable. You know, I was still thinking, well, we still need to treat them. You know, they've been in the water a long time. They could be injured because they've been battered about a little bit in the surf and things like that. And there could be that potential of hypothermia could have started to set in. But they're alive.
The little girl is pulled to safety, followed by her exhausted father. He spent almost an hour treading water while clinging onto her.
I don't think they would have carried on for much longer, judging by the state of the father, to be honest with you. I mean, he was absolutely done in. He was so tired. Little girl was crying her eyes out. I don't think Dad was far behind. I don't think most of us were far behind, to be honest with you.
Ben and Grace are both showing signs of hypothermia. To get them to hospital as fast as possible, they're evacuated by air. It's the end of an ordeal that began with just a paddle in the sea.
Grace is a real water baby. She loves going in all the sea. So we were splashing around down on the beach, getting a little bit more adventurous, going up to our waists. Then Grace went off to one side, and then I thought, well, maybe I should go and try and get a bit closer to her because she seems to be getting further away. Took hold of Grace and, you know, tried to walk her into the beach, but the sand was disappearing underneath us. The current was too strong and we just got pushed further away.
In just a few minutes, the rip current had carried Ben and Grace hundreds of meters out to sea.
Couldn't hear anything over the sound of the breakers. They were crashing over our heads. We could hardly see the shore. Grace was panicking. I couldn't grab hold of her. And I could feel myself struggling to keep above water.
Ben decided to try and make an improvised flotation device by filling his shirt with air.
Couldn't take the shirt off without letting go of her. Got to the stage where I thought, we've got to do something. And so I pushed her away. And then she went under, and I pulled her back up again. She was laid on her back, and the little flotation device was just behind her head. Grace had said, "Yeah, I'm getting cold now, Daddy. Yeah. I don't want to die. We're going to be okay." It was at that point that we heard the helicopter go over.
You start to think about if that was me, if that was my child or anything like that, could I have done it? And I think I'd probably struggle to tread water for 30 to 40 minutes myself, let alone holding on to a young girl. People say to us, you know, "Oh, you did a really good job there, you know, you're a hero." We weren't the heroes on that day. That guy was the hero for holding on and doing what he did.
Determination, pure determination, and willpower. You know, he's got his daughter, probably the only thing he loves most in the world, in his arms, and if he gives in, she's a goner.
I was smiling for weeks afterwards, and I think it was mainly because the first words out of my mouth were "thank you," and you think, you know what I mean, you're going through the thick of it here, but what a polite kid. Got kids myself, so yeah, pulls at the heartstrings, doesn't it?
Was that the first time you'd ever saved anyone's life?
Yeah, it was, yeah. I went back to work and I was floating, I was buzzing. I was absolutely on cloud nine. Yeah, I only had half an hour left of my shift, so it was great.
Expecting the unexpected comes with the territory. The only thing the volunteers know for sure is that they'll be facing the same old adversary.
Anyone who spends any time at sea quickly develops a very healthy respect for it. We're winning the battle, but we're never going to win the war because the sea's always got a trick up its sleeve.
If it decides one day that, yeah, I'm gonna wash you off the boat, then you're going off the boat. You're almost riding it. It's like it's an untamable beast.
You can't fight it, you sort of have to go with it. I think people liken it to being in a washing machine on a high spin rate.
When you've got that force of water coming onto you, cold water, this isn't a bath or a swimming pool, this is the sea. You can't see help coming. And how long do you cling on for? How long do you keep your head above the water?
If you know that help is on its way, you can relax, but if you don't know it's on its way, it's one of the most loneliest places on the planet.
It's not just our coastal waters that can catch out the unwary. There are 9 lifeboat stations standing guard over the nation's lakes and rivers. 4 protect the length of the Thames. The busiest is here at Tower. On Tower's patch, the fast-flowing fresh water of the Thames meets the full force of the incoming saltwater tide. Combined with the bridges, boats and underwater obstacles, it creates a lethal mixture of eddies, undertows and confusing currents. The Tower crew must take on these unpredictable waters every time they launch.
First time I was on a boat on that river, I realised what a dangerous river it was. You've got tides running faster in the sea because they're confined between very narrow embankments.
Because you've got the river flow coming out and the tidal flow coming in, you've got fresh water and salt water meeting. So you get this almost corkscrew effect. So if you're in the water, it's not just a case of moving laterally, you get pulled down as well.
If you were in the water, you would find yourself in difficulty very, very quickly.
The weather tonight, Jeff, is cloudy. Wind strength is 2, and its wind direction is north-northwest. That's about it. No faults with the boat. Everything's pretty good to rock and roll.
10:30 on a cold March night. The Coast Guard call out the Tower crew on an urgent job. There's a person in the river.
Whenever you hear that someone's in the water, certainly on the river, 100%, you know straight away that it's time critical.
All clear, Craig.
On the Coast Guard tail lifeboat, we've launched on service to a person in the water at Deptford Creek.
This is London Coast Guard, Roger. View information, your transmission is weak and very.
The man fell into the water 6 miles downriver. At a top speed of 40 knots, the crew are less than 10 minutes away. But with water temperatures as low as 8 degrees, the shock of immersion can kill in minutes.
The biggest problem that people face when they end up in cold water is cold shock, cold water shock. And what this does is it constricts the blood vessels in the skin. You then start to lose the power in your muscles.
The muscles which operate the lungs on the outside can't pull the rib cage open properly, so rapidly you lose that extra air and buoyancy. And then your mouth goes beneath the surface and everything gets very bad for you.
The 53-year-old man, a tourist from Turkey, had been taking a stroll by the river with friends and family when he disappeared.
All of a sudden we heard the splash. We turned around and looked, he wasn't there. I ran to the edge of the wall and I looked over and I couldn't see nothing. So then I thought to myself, if he's gone in there, and he's gone.
Well, the first thing is falling. You could land on something hard on your way to the water, so will there be any broken bones? Is he going to be having any problems breathing? Is he going to stay afloat until we get there?
Up ahead, the crew spot Deptford Creek. The police boat is already on the scene, but can't fit under the bridge across the entrance to get to the casualty.
Down here, Craig.
When we arrived in Deptford Creek, we saw that a gentleman was holding on to part of the embankment wall, holding on for dear life, really.
He was on a little ledge just under the wall, amazingly wearing a life jacket, but he was still in the water and in a really inaccessible spot, and there was no way out for him.
You could see that he was, without a doubt, very, very scared.
Port side.
Wedged under the embankment, the 53-year-old is balanced precariously, half in and half out of the water.
We're having to move very gently and very carefully at low speed to get very close to him without pinning him between the boat and the wall, which would crush him to death.
Stay there for a second. Hang on a minute, mate. Wait. Grab my hand.
Finally in position, the crew now need to persuade the freezing casualty to lower himself back into the water so they can lift him out.
Okay, mate, what's your name? What's your...
Ismail.
Okay.
Ismail.
We're going to bring you up and over the sponson, okay?
We first tried to get him over the side of the boat, the port side of the boat.
1, 2, 3.
Hang on. Bring the arm around his back.
Tap your legs.
But we didn't realise how big a gentleman he was.
Try and help us, mate.
That's it. See if you can get your leg up on this rope.
He was actually quite heavy, and normally, quite often, we'll bring people over the bow of the boat. But we decided that for this particular incident, we'd take him over the stern platform.
Just nice and gently, just start coming round. Just bring him back that way. Okay, keep coming with us, it's all right. Nearly there. Watch that line's getting caught up.
We got a good hold of him and were able to get him around to the stern of the boat and lift him in.
Okay, nearly there. Well done. Sit you up. Just get your breath for a minute. Against here. Get a couple of blankets. Just relax, don't worry.
What?
What did you say your name was?
Ismail.
Ismail.
Yeah.
Öyle bir soğukluk hissetmedim, yaşamadım hayatımda. Yani her tarafım böyle titredim, böyle parmaklarımı açamadım, kilitlendi parmaklarım sanki. Bütün dizlerim kilitlendi. Donacaktım ve çıkamayacak gibi bir hisse kapıldım. Çok kötü bir andı benim için.
Ismail, we're going to just sit you up. I'm going to lean you back.
Bir daha sanki hiç bu dünyayı göremeyeceğim diye bir korku hissettim ta ki...
The water's very cold, isn't it? The water's very cold. Very cold, so just relax, no problem.
He was in quite a lot of shock, and I think he'd been in a bad place, he'd been quite worried that he might not make it out. Yeah, and he was in a very dangerous place. He was also very, very cold. So how long he would have been able to hold on for, how much longer, we're not sure.
I'm in the hospital. I'm very good.
That's fine, but at the moment you're on the lifeboat. We need to get you somewhere we can get you off and get you checked over, all right? So that's you just relax for the moment.
Gibi oradaydı sanki. Çok mutluydum. Sanki yeniden hayata döndüm. O soğuk sanki artık bana ne bileyim böyle sıcak bir yaz günü gibi geldi. Öyle bir hisle mutluluk duydum.
The crew take Ismail to a waiting ambulance at a nearby pier. En route, he reveals the cause of his late-night dip in the Thames.
Go photo with my phone, mobile phone.
Okay. Your foot slipped? Straight in?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Çok istiyordum Londra'ya gelmeyi. Çok istedim. Özellikle idealimde saygıdeğer kraliçeyle tanışmak vardı. Benim de gözüme bankaların olduğu o yüksek ve ışıklı binalar dikkatimi çekti. O binaları arkama alıp bir selfie çekmek istedim. Nehre doğru yaklaştım. Yüksek bir yerden dedim daha iyi, net çıkar diye düşündüm. Tam çıkar çıkmaz dengemi kaybettim ve kendimi suyun içinde buldum.
It's certainly the first selfie-related shout that I've been on, or that I've known about.
Pull that over your head for now.
Jacket wet.
Get that round you.
Things happen, people take risks. How many times do we take risks and we don't fall off a ladder, or we don't fall down the stairs, or we don't fall off our bike? Luckily, there were people who got to him and rescued him, but it could have been catastrophic.
İnsanlar melekleri sadece gökyüzünde olarak algılar ya da düşünürüz. O gün o insanlar birer melekti ve hepsi yeryüzüne inmişti sanki. Beni kurtarmaya gelmişlerdi. Ben hepsine çok çok teşekkür ediyorum, o güzel insanlara. Hepsinin elini tanımasam da sıkmak isterdim buradan. Hepsine çok çok öpücük yolluyorum.
Just get your breath for a minute.
Since his accident, Ishmael has decided to cut back on the selfie taking.
Daha dikkatliyim. Öyle yükseğe çıkıp selfie çekmiyorum artık. Özellikle nehir kenarına hiç yaklaşmıyorum.
In Devon, Sam, the surfer who dislocated her shoulder, is still waiting for an operation. But she hasn't let the experience put her off visiting her favourite beach.
I love this beach. I've been coming here for the last 17 years. At one point, I didn't think I'd ever see this beach again, or my family. Hi, pals. Hi. They rescued a woman in distress with a dislocated shoulder, but they also saved a mum, a daughter, a sister, a wife. I'm not going in there. I don't think I'm going to be searching for those big waves anytime soon, but I'll certainly be back in the sea, absolutely.
And after being treated at hospital for hypothermia, Ben and his daughter Grace were both discharged.
Oh, there she blows.
There she blows.
Today, Ben's back at Whitby Lifeboat Station for the first time.
To save my daughter, it's just epic.
Lee's got young children, I've got young children. That's what brings it home. It's like, you know, what you did, treading water and holding on to your daughter. You saved her, not us. Ben's definitely the hero, definitely.
I'm all embarrassed now.
For a while, as hard as we were swimming, we couldn't get away from the boat.
They were in the worst possible place at the worst possible time.
To see someone disappear under the water right in front of you is brutal. It's absolutely horrendous.
Oh my God, back to that.
We thought that we've lost him, it's too late.